Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to speak with you about this research on nurturing quality with a trauma lens, focused on professional development. And I wanted to give a big shout out to two of our co-authors in this work who are here with us today, Bridget Hatfield and Hillary Lewis, both from Oregon State University. Also, big thanks to Emiko Goga-DeBose, who is not able to be here, and the rest of the Roots of Resilience research team. There's a huge effort to pull all of this together over a course of many, many years, actually, going on 5+ years. Also want to take just a quick moment and say a huge thank you to early childhood teachers and families who have participated with us. None of this could be possible without their participation and partnership. So lots of thanks to them, as well as to Phil Fisher and his team from the Center for Translational Neuroscience at the University of Oregon, and you heard from him on Tuesday. We've also worked with colleagues at the University of Southern Maine on this work, and a number of consultants and trainers that have really helped support professional learning and development of our team. And all of this has been funded by the U.S. Department of Education through a grant with the Institute for Education Sciences. So what I'm going to do with our time today is to introduce a framing for resilience, move on to thinking about nurturing that resilience with a trauma lens, and then focus in on this Roots of Resilience program and the research that we've been conducting. So resilience. So on Tuesday, both Phil and Megan shared about enormous stressors and challenges that we know are happening and we learn more deeply about among families, children, families, and providers. And how those stressors are increasing exposure to toxic stress and the opportunity and power of resilience. So that's what we're picking up today. So we'll start with a definition of resilience. And as a body of researchers, we've come together around this way of thinking about resilience as a process. It's positive adaptation in the face of adversity. So a couple things that I particularly love about resilience is that it's a natural human process that every single person, every child, every adult is capable of and is just a natural part of our lives. But it also is something that has to be nurtured. It has to be fostered and encouraged. And it is something that can be nurtured intentionally, and it happens over time. And really at the heart of that nurturing is these supportive relationships. So that's what we're going to focus on today. There are many other protective factors that support resilience. And at the center of much of that are these nurturing relationships. So then we'll move on to thinking about nurturing that resilience with a trauma lens. So I'll define trauma for us as well. So we define trauma as a deeply distressing event or series of events. And that can be caused by ACEs, those adverse childhood experiences like abuse, neglect, exposure to violence, living with a family member who has become incarcerated or is living with an uncontrolled substance abuse problem or untreated mental illness. But it can also be caused by many things that often are not captured in those traditional ACEs. So trauma can absolutely be caused by racism and other forms of discrimination, as well as historical trauma, natural disasters, pandemics, and other forms of community trauma. So right now, today, many people, many communities are facing traumas on top of traumas. And this is where I usually take a deep breath. I encourage you to do so as well, because this is some heavy stuff. And so what can we do? One of the things that we can do is to provide care in a way that is trauma-informed. So trauma-informed care, I'm going to provide just a basic framework for you. You can learn more about this from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. I have the website here on the slide, or from following up more with us in Roots of Resilience or others. So trauma-informed care is when a program, an organization, or a system realizes the widespread impact of trauma, recognizes the signs and the symptoms of trauma, and responds to all of that knowledge and recognition by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into policies and procedures and practices, and additionally actively resist re-traumatization. So that's what we're striving for. Trauma-informed care differs from trauma-specific services in a really powerful way. So trauma-informed care is something that we can do universally. We can do it everywhere. We can all of us do that. Trauma-specific services are things that require more advanced training and experience. So where are we in early learning with trauma-informed care then? Fortunately, we do have a growing number of opportunities to learn about trauma and how it affects development, and to also engage in ideas about resilience. Presently, many of those are what we might call light touch opportunities. So a one-time workshop is a great example. This presentation is a good example. So we have those on one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have what are very intensive and expensive, potentially very powerful programs like Head Start Trauma Smart. Those are a little bit of research showing some strong impacts of that so far, but much more research to do. And what we noticed is there's this big in between these ends of the spectrum, and one of the needs, we need many things. One of the needs that our team has worked to try to help support is professional development and support for early childhood teachers and providers that's specifically designed for them, for their context of early care and education. So that's what I'm going to share with you today, is what we've created, kind of where we are and what we're learning from the research. So the program is called Roots of Resilience, Teachers Awakening Children's Healing. The purpose of this program is to support early childhood teachers, to nurture resilience with children impacted by trauma. And when we say teachers, we are very intentionally referring to every and all adults that are caring for children in home-based settings to more formal childcare centers. So lead teachers, assistants, directors, owners, specialists, the whole team. So what we've created is an online course and video-based coaching. So even 5 years ago, we knew that many people couldn't make it to in-person opportunities, especially people who are caring full-time for children. And so we focused on this online option, but the video-based coaching can also be done in person. And one of the important ideas in this work, coming from that universal approach to trauma-informed care, is that we don't have to be a therapist to help a child or a family strengthen resilience. We can do that as people that are in children's lives every day. There's one other piece I want to make sure to mention before moving on. It's not on the slide. Roots of Resilience is not a curriculum. So it is an approach to the work that can complement, come alongside, be implemented with really any developmentally appropriate early childhood curriculum. So it's professional learning and development for teachers to help strengthen that trauma lens that we bring to the work. Okay, 4 key ideas from our conceptual framework that I want to share with you. The first is that we're thinking about early childhood teachers as gardeners of children's roots of resilience. We focus on caregivers' strengths, self-regulation, and supporting and nurturing self-care. Secondly, Roots of Resilience overlays a trauma lens on what teachers already know and do well. So we built very directly and explicitly from best practice in early care and education. And through that, one area of particular focus is strengthening resilience through responsive interactions during everyday moments. And then finally, we've done this, created an online setting, but really trying to keep at the forefront as much as possible as this relationship-based professional development. So I'll tell you just a little bit about the program. The online course has 3 parts. It is run in 6 modules. It's self-paced, and participants can earn up to 30 hours if they complete the whole course, 30 hours. Of Set 2 training on the Oregon Registry. The first part really focuses in on resilience and then brings alongside trauma lens and how trauma affects development. Then moving on to identifying children's needs using that trauma lens and working in close partnership with families and with specialists. And then thirdly, moving into these restorative relationships and focus on self-regulation in everyday moments. The course is designed to be very interactive as we can be. It includes activities, self-reflection, sharing with others. So those 30 hours are not all sitting and listening to a presentation like this. And teachers are telling us, we've been doing this for a number of years now, and they've been telling us that they find it helpful, engaging, interesting, and really relevant to their work. The video-based coaching part of the program, teachers are filming themselves during everyday moments with children, about 20 minutes a week, using an iPad that we've checked out to them. They upload that film automatically to a secure server at OSU, and a team member goes in and watches that film and looks for small moments, these little tiny moments between an adult and a child, where the teacher's already doing the thing that we are planning to coach that next week. So every coaching session has a special focus, and we're looking for that in the film ahead of time, and then responding to that by sharing in that web session, here's what we're talking about today. Here are 3 examples of you already doing that. So let's talk more about why that's so impactful for children who have experienced trauma, and maybe how we can brainstorm ideas to do even more of that. That's kind of what the coaching session, how that goes. It's 100% strength-based. We don't do any correction. And this is built very much based on and in partnership with another coaching program called FIND, the Filming Interactions to Nurture Development Program, led by Phil Fisher, who you heard from on Tuesday. They build us coaching on serve and return, and we take that framework and hone in specifically on serve and return interactions that are focused on self-regulation, showing children self-regulation in those moments, and the teachers returning that with a way that specifically supports self-regulation. So our theory of change is that when teachers participate in either one of these options, the course or the coaching, or both, that they gain experiences and perspectives and knowledge and some skills that help them to identify and respond more sensitively to children's needs, knowing this is already an area of focus for teachers, but we've given them another tool, especially for children that are impacted by trauma. So then that should help children to feel more safe, empowered, and valued in those early learning settings. Their stress response systems should become less reactive, and over time, their engagement and self-regulation should improve along with their learning and well-being. So this is our theory, and then that takes us into the research. So the research, we're examining that theory of change, and we've been doing 2 phases of research so far. The first is a focus on implementation. So we've been trying things out and getting a lot of feedback and making continuous improvements. So we did that research for 2 years, and then we moved on to an outcomes phase. So phase 1, I'm not going to share the findings with you now, but you have access in that folder that Megan showed us. I sent her 2 things to post there, a version of this research brief in English and a version in Spanish. And it summarizes the learnings from our first 2 years, and it also refers to a longer full-length journal article if you want to know more about the rationale and the research base, and also more about our research. Okay, so I'm going to focus on phase 2, which is outcomes. So this all happened before the pandemic. Fortunately, we were able to conduct a study over the whole year. And what we did was we recruited 30 teachers from the broader Central Oregon area in Deschutes, Crook, and Jefferson counties. We recruited about a third family child care providers, teachers working in centers, and Head Start programs. And they all signed up because they were interested in this professional development program, and they identified that they worked with children who were probably impacted by trauma, okay? And so we recruited them into the study, and then we asked them, would you prefer the course or the coaching? And when they told us their preference, we said, okay, great. So then we are going to randomly assign you to get that intervention now or later. So that created this rigorous research design with a wait list, not getting the intervention during the course of the study, but they had access to it after the study. So the study started out with observations and assessments. Then we do that random assignment that I just described, and then we do more observations and assessments about 4 months later. And after all of that, the waitlist group gets access to the program, and the course group can start coaching if they want, and the coaching group can start the course if they want. For the research, we also recruited up to 4 children per classroom or group to participate in individual observations and assessments that are focused on the child. And that resulted in 88 preschool aged children participating with us. I want to mention before I share anything further, that two things about the sample. One is that there was a lot of adversity. So teachers, 65% of the teachers reported 4 or more ACEs in their own lives. And in the young children already by preschool, 64% of them had 1 or more ACE reported by their parents, and a third had 3 or more ACEs. The second thing I want to mention about the sample, it is very limited in diversity with respect to race, ethnicity, and language. So 91% of the teachers identified as white, and 85% of the children were identified as white. And the overwhelming majority of the others had identified as Latinx, Latino, or Latina. And I think only one teacher was male in this sample. So we have quantitative and qualitative results. Quantitatively, here are the things we did for observations and assessments. We looked at teachers' emotional support with the class measure, the classroom assessment scoring system. We looked at children's engagement with the in-class. It's an individualized version. It's specifically looking at a particular child and their engagement with teachers and peers and tasks. We did direct assessments with young ones and through kind of games and assessments with math and literacy and self-regulation. What did we find? We found positive impacts of participation in Roots of Resilience compared to that waitlist control for teachers' emotional support and for children's negative engagement. So we saw reductions in negative engagement, and that includes conflict with teachers, conflict with peers, and behavioral control. So we saw an improvement in behavioral control and less conflict in children whose teachers participated in the intervention. We also saw a significant improvement in math skills, but not in literacy or self-regulation or positive engagement. So there's a number of things what you're doing to dig into and unpack and understand these findings further. I'll share one of them with you today for the sake of time. This emotional support domain of the class has 4 components, and those are called dimensions. And we took a look at those dimensions, and we looked by the 3 groups of teachers. Those in the wait list are the orange bar. Those that were in the course during the intervention study are in the darker green bar, and those were in the coaching or in the lighter green bar. And I'll bring your attention to the 2 pieces of this that show an asterisk, and the asterisk means that it was a statistically significant difference. So teachers who participated in the course showed actually a pretty sizable, a pretty large improvement in teacher sensitivity, which we didn't see in either of the other groups. When we look at negative climate, we see, and negative climate something doesn't happen a lot, so seeing a shift in that is actually fairly important and exciting. So we're actually seeing a decrease or in negative climate, looks like an increase, but it's reversed. For teachers participating in coaching in particular, a little bit also for those in the course. And thanks to the hard work and dedication of Hillary Lewis, a graduate student with us at OSU, we have qualitative interviews on 7 of our participants. And she and another researcher coded and analyzed transcripts from these interviews for reliability and examined them really systematically through content analysis. We are learning a number of things from these interviews, and I wanted to share 3 themes that specifically relate to impacts of Roots of Resilience from teachers' perspectives. So they told us in their own words that their thinking or perspective taking shifted, and this was shown by all 7 of them. So I have just one example of that for you here. A teacher that participated in the course says it just helped me constantly reiterate to myself, they're not doing this to be a pain. They're doing this for a reason, and they're calling out for help. So as I was reading that, I was like, oh my, that is what he's doing. The second category is a shift in day-to-day interactions with children. And we had 5 of the 7 teachers provided an example of this. One teacher says, that's more on my radar, like every afternoon to just kind of check in with him. I look forward to that part of my day. Whereas a couple of months ago, it didn't have that, or it wasn't on my radar to check in with this kid every day. And then finally, 6 of the 7 teachers showed or expressed something related to a shift in self-regulation or self-care. And here's one example. I'm more aware of my own emotional states. I can be like, hey, I'm going to walk away for a few minutes because I'm really frustrated. And then the final quote that I wanted to share with you was from a teacher who shared that initially she was really intimidated about this idea of being filmed when she was providing care or teaching with kids. And so, but then at the end she said, it actually ends up being really fun. I got so much out of it that I would really recommend that anybody do it. So implications from this work, I'm really excited and I want to learn more about this initial finding we have that this strength-based professional development can reduce negativity. And again, we saw that in reductions of negative climate overall and also in reductions in negative engagement among children. And the negative engagement, I think, is especially important because we have these as another set of findings where at baseline we saw a link pretty consistently between children's ACEs, those average child experiences, and more negative engagement. So then in the professional development program is helping to decrease that negative engagement, and that's really exciting. And then additionally, another kind of bigger implication for the field, I think, is that when we do professional development focused on resilience, that's first and foremost is resilience, and then a trauma lens comes alongside it, that we can benefit teachers as well as children. I mentioned already the limitation in the sample in racial and ethnic and linguistic diversity. Fortunately, we've been able to remedy a lot of that in the work we're doing after the research, but it certainly is a big limitation of the research. And I wrote down that message that I saw, leaving people out of research impacts policy, and I fully take that to heart and would love to talk with you all more about how we can continue to work on more inclusive and diverse samples and research. We have a small sample as well, and it's a short-term study, so we were only looking at the first intervention that people completed. A number of our teachers did do both the course and the coaching, or vice versa. And then finally, measures of the class is not a measure of trauma-informed care. It is certainly aligned with our theory of change, and it is something that we would expect to see shift when we're working from a trauma lens, but we need better measures out there. I will make one small additional mention, and I could talk later for much longer if you're interested in this, but we've done some work in other studies to see whether the class seems to be biased against home-based programs, and we're not seeing that at all. And that makes sense because it actually comes from kind of a legacy that is developed initially for all types of care, not for centers. So just wanted to mention that. Final last slide I have for you is about scale up. So there's been a lot of interest in this work, and we are very committed to making this accessible in ways that work for communities. So we've worked primarily for the majority here in our Central Oregon community with local sponsors after the research to try to scale this up and increase access. We've done that through scholarships for the online course, which we have going on as well right now. We launched into workshops, which were not part of the research, but are super fun and very much wanted by providers, teachers, as well as kind of directors and people who set all this up. We moved online to webinars during the pandemic, try to make them very interactive, much more interesting than listening to a presentation. And we've been just really fortunate to be able to work with a much more diverse group of teachers, both in race and ethnicity as well as languages. So right now we have a number of bilingual providers in the online course cohort that we've got running right now. And I'm working with a bilingual trainer to offer our first webinar series in Spanish in November. And that gets to this next idea around train the trainers. So we have a couple of different efforts, one in coaching and one in webinar workshops right now, trying to partner more with others outside of the university. And so I'm eager and interested in chatting with those of you who would like to discuss that and share ideas. You can reach me at my email address. We also have a blog, and I'll post this in the chat here once I wrap up. And it's not super fancy or anything like that. It's less pretty than what Megan is putting together for the Early Learners website, but it does give you a link to our online course, and there's a video and some testimonials about Roots of Resilience, and our research is all getting posted up there. We have a couple of research articles that are under review right now, and so once they get accepted for publication, I'll make sure that we get those research briefs available in English and Spanish as well for everyone, and post those up on our blog. So thank you so much, and eager to hear your thoughts and questions.